Warning: Carney scraps industrial carbon tax. Leftist leaders push dangerous rhetoric across Canada. Canada's political landscape is facing significant turmoil as Parliament reconvenes after a slow and largely uneventful summer, exposing both the limitations and contradictions of Prime Minister Mark Carney's leadership. With the House scheduled to sit for the fewest days since 1937, legislative progress has been minimal, leaving many Canadians frustrated and questioning the government's effectiveness. Carney's early months have been defined by cautious messaging and elite-focused optics, which contrast sharply with the public's daily struggles with housing affordability, rising inflation, and access to essential services. Announcements such as suggesting first-time homebuyers could save enough for a down payment in just 4 years have been widely criticized as out of touch, reinforcing perceptions of a disconnect between Carney's technocratic priorities and the real-life challenges faced by ordinary Canadians. Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has continued to exploit the widening disconnect between Mark Carney and ordinary Canadians, consistently speaking directly to working families about pressing issues such as affordability, rising living costs, bureaucratic overreach, and the mismanagement associated with political elites. Poilievre's approach emphasizes emotional connection, relatability, and plain-spoken communication, which stands in stark contrast to Carney's technocratic, cautious, and often abstract messaging. Analysts note that Carney's limited emotional intelligence, lack of transparency, and difficulty connecting with the average voter significantly weaken his credibility and hinder his ability to effectively address the day-to-day concerns of Canadians, leaving a growing perception that he is out of touch with the public he is meant to serve. The media's role in shaping public perception has come under intense scrutiny, especially in its coverage of conservative figures such as Charlie Kirk. Vigils and memorials held in his honor across Canada have sparked extreme reactions, including leftist counter-protests, acts of vandalism, and aggressive rhetoric that escalates tensions. Politicians and public figures, including Manitoba's Minister of Families Nani Fontaine, faced significant backlash for condemning Kirk on social media, highlighting what many perceive as double standards in accountability. While ordinary workers or citizens can face real-world consequences for controversial statements or actions, elected officials often remain insulated from similar scrutiny. This imbalance fuels widespread public outrage, deepens cynicism, and erodes trust in institutions that are meant to be impartial and accountable, leaving many Canadians frustrated with the inconsistent application of standards and justice. On the energy and climate front, Carney's administration is under mounting pressure regarding the industrial carbon tax and strict emissions caps. Recent negotiations with provinces and industry leaders suggest a willingness to reconsider rigid limits, favoring more flexible approaches aimed at reducing carbon intensity while still pursuing Canada's net zero targets. Critics, however, argue that these policy shifts lack transparency and may disproportionately benefit corporate interests rather than ordinary Canadians. Entities such as Brookfield Renewables and the broader push toward electrification are frequently cited as having outsized influence. Many question whether these measures genuinely prioritize environmental protection, economic fairness, or a combination of both, raising serious concerns about accountability, public trust, and the true motivations behind Carney's climate strategy. International developments are intensifying domestic tensions in Canada as global conflicts and diplomatic pressures weigh heavily on public perception. President Trump's calls for NATO nations to boycott Russian oil, combined with escalating military activities such as drone tests and troop mobilizations across Europe, highlight a precarious and unstable geopolitical environment. Canadians are observing these events with concern, aware of potential economic and security implications. Domestically, protests like the Canada First rally in Toronto reflect growing frustration over street blockages, civil unrest, and aggressive counter-protest actions. Reports of Antifa targeting peaceful demonstrators underscore the deep ideological polarization gripping Canadian society, amplifying fears of social fragmentation and challenging the government's ability to maintain order and unity amid rising public dissatisfaction. Throughout these ongoing crises, Mark Carney's leadership is increasingly perceived as reactive rather than proactive, with many critics arguing that his decisions are heavily influenced by globalist priorities and elite networks rather than the immediate needs of everyday Canadians. From attending high-profile cultural events to maintaining prominent boardroom connections, detractors claim he prioritizes optics, image, and personal prestige over grounded, relatable governance. In contrast, conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and other opposition figures actively capitalize on these perceived weaknesses, framing themselves as champions of accountability, transparency, and responsiveness, connecting directly with voters frustrated by what they see as Carney's detached, technocratic approach. Social media has become a major amplifier of political tensions in Canada, where platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and X facilitate rapid spread of outrage, misinformation, and partisan narratives. Leftist extremism online, combined with aggressive commentary and selective media framing, has created an environment where anger and mistrust dominate public discourse. Ordinary citizens and politicians alike are scrutinized, yet many Canadians perceive a troubling double standard. Everyday people face harsh consequences for missteps, while elected officials often escape accountability. This widening gap fuels debate over what qualifies as genuine responsibility or apology and intensifies polarization, leaving citizens skeptical of both government and media. Ultimately, Canada finds itself at a pivotal moment, facing the difficult task of balancing economic stability, social cohesion, and environmental commitments while navigating deeply polarized politics and intense media scrutiny. Citizens increasingly demand leaders who can communicate clearly, act with empathy, and deliver concrete, actionable solutions to pressing issues such as affordability, healthcare, and climate policy. Carney's cautious, elite-focused approach, combined with inconsistent messaging and an emphasis on optics, contrasts sharply with Poilievre's populist energy and direct engagement with everyday Canadians. This stark difference has left the nation divided over who genuinely represents public interests and how the country should respond to both internal challenges, such as civil unrest and economic pressures, and external threats stemming from global geopolitical instability.